drones, cyber terrorism, an autonomous military complex infected with betrayal and the mistakes of the past. From campaign to multiplayer to zombies, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 is considered by many to be the last all-time great title in a beloved era of FPS games. It brought, with an interesting tagline, the Call of Duty series from the pages of history to a speculative future for the first time. But not just any future. Black Ops 2 is set in 2025. In honor of this classic now being set in the present, I decided to take a trip back down memory lane to investigate what Treyarch got right about our future. From technology and weapons in a new age of autonomous warfare to predictions on culture, politics, economics, and the state of the world as a whole. You'd be surprised how much they actually got right. The future is now. This is Black Ops 2 in 2025. Following its predecessor's Cold War espionage, Black Ops 2 centers around a new Cold War, the capitalist powers of the world baring their teeth at one another after the Chinese economy is crippled in a cyber attack, one China blames the USA for. Chances are you forgot this little initial subplot of the campaign if you played it, but the game's 2025 sections revolve around a rare earth element called Celerium being the catalyst for breakthroughs in quantum computing. The Celerium device is later used to take control of the entire US military's arsenal of drones, turning them against it. So, before your eyes completely glaze over from all the technobabble, quantum computers harness quantum mechanics to solve problems unthinkably faster than traditional transistor-based computers. Don't worry, you don't need to understand the details. The point is, not only does this in fact pose a massive threat to data encryption, privacy, and security as we know it, breakthroughs in quantum computing are actually happening right now as of this writing. Stocks are soaring and people are clamoring to get a piece of this new leap in technology. While neither of 2024's hot topics in computing, AI, and cryptocurrencies appear in Black Ops 2's storyline, and both were being worked on in 2012 by the way, so they could have been, the biggest difference between the tech world of 2025 and that of the game's 2025 is actually economical. In reality, you'd probably see tech opportunists trying to profit off of tech like quantum computing before you see a cyber terrorist using it to cripple the economy for a doomsday plot. But hey, Raul Menendez is a complex guy. But that data security, hacking, and the evolving face of encryption takes center place here in a cyber Cold War between major capitalist powers, it's certainly not the dumbest future plot I've ever seen. And if we're talking about Black Ops 2 predicting 2025, they're not off to a bad start. Making a small mistake that seems to follow you forever is something I think many can relate to. For many years, I used the same email and password for everything: fun stuff, business stuff, personal stuff, getting free things for signing up on sites, subscriptions, what have you. And in doing this, I shared my info everywhere. The sharing and selling of personal data is actually an immense industry, data brokers they're called. And there was a period where I was getting spam texts and calls in the dozens every day. I had to ignore any number I didn't know personally, meaning that I missed important stuff a number of times. It was a serious pain. Well, the sponsor of today's video, Incogni, solves that problem, saving an immense amount of time and effort and my private personal data in the process. In just 5 or so minutes after signing up, Incogni had cleared my data from over 50 brokers. It's at over 100 now. Even knowing how public a lot of my stuff was, it was surprising how bad it had gotten. And the nice thing, I don't have to do anything. Incogni's service will always be working in the background, protecting my personal info and saving me countless hours in the process, or, well, very literally counted hours, because you can see how many right here on the dashboard. Pretty satisfying. If you want to lower your risk of cyber attacks, identity theft, generally reduce your online footprint, use my code at incogni.com/Rilo for an exclusive 60% off. That's code Rilo, R-I-L-O-E. The link is right there in the description. So don't be like me and waste hours sifting through spam texts, ignoring every unknown call, and sign up for Incogni at incogni.com/Rilo and just sit back and let them work to get your personal info cleared away from anywhere you don't want it to be. Thank you again to Incogni for supporting the channel today. Hacking, quantum entanglement, rare earth metals. Okay, all fun sci-fi sounding catalysts for a modern Cold War. But what about the politics driving these conflicts? The political sphere in science fiction is always impossibly difficult to predict. Afghanistan still has an American-backed government in Black Ops 2's 2025, for example. However, the importance of China's monopoly on transistor production creating global economic tension in 2025 is a prediction that Treyarch absolutely nailed. The relevance of PMCs, private military contractors, also a pretty spot-on prediction. The SDC, or Strategic Defense Coalition, a conglomerate of allied Asian nations against the United States, is described as having the collectively largest military in the world in Black Ops 2. This could be compared to the UDCG, the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, the alliance between the EU and 57 global nations against the invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2022. Speaking of which, this is one bit of the game that feels completely off. Besides an offhand mention related to alliances with the SDC, Russia plays absolutely zero part in Black Ops 2's politics. Being one of the largest energy exporters in the world, it's strange that they seem to take a complete backseat here, but energy seems of little concern in Black Ops 2. Presumably because clean energy has complete dominance, and unfortunately, very poor prediction for the future. Speaking of which, the United States has a female president in Black Ops 2's 2025, a very common prediction in media of this time period, by the way. In the 2010s, it seemed a given to many that this would have happened by the 2020s, especially given the number of women leaders across the globe for decades now, and, well, that's yet to pan out. Then there's Secretary of Defense David Petraeus, probably my favorite fumble in all of Call of Duty's forays into casting real recognizable people in its campaigns. For those who do not know, David Petraeus was the director of the CIA in 2012 and consulted for Black Ops 2's campaign with Treyarch. Over his career, he oversaw troops in Iraq and Afghanistan and served the US Army for 37 years. Black Ops 2 sees him as having advanced to Secretary of Defense of the United States, and he shows up repeatedly consulting with JSOC and even alongside the president during the invasion of the US by SDC forces. Now, in reality, Petraeus was revealed by the FBI to have been having an extramarital affair with his official biographer, Paula Broadwell, at some points between 2007 and 2012, leading Petraeus to resign from the CIA on November 9, 2012, 3 days before the release of Black Ops 2. Petraeus eventually pleaded guilty to misdemeanor mishandling of classified materials and served 2 years probation as well as a $100,000 fine. Secretary of Defense David Petraeus appears as an extremely unfortunate casting choice by Treyarch, something the Call of Duty games seem uncannily bad at over the years. Chances are, as funny as it would be, we are not going to see Petraeus walking around the decks of the USS Barack Obama in 2025. Which we still don't have, by the way, much to my disappointment, but the Obama is a great segue to a key part of any near future setting: vehicles. I'm gonna jump right in here. There are way too many VTOLs. Futuristic jet-propelled ones, that is. VTOL, or vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, they've been the stuff of science fiction since they were invented. And part of the reason you don't see spiffy jet-propelled ones like this is, well, you do see them. They're called Ospreys. The V-22 Osprey, designed in the late 1980s, is a turboprop, meaning it has jet engine-powered propellers, which rotate from a vertically to horizontally orientated position. We are developing new VTOLs in 2025, namely the Bell V-280 Valor, but the real reason we don't see these jet engine-propelled VTOLs is simple. The point of a VTOL craft is the speed of a fixed-engine airplane with the ability to land without a runway, on a helipad, a grass field, a dirt lot. Try that with a jet and, well, say goodbye to your lawn. Essentially, a VTOL or helicopter works because it can take off and land far closer to people and infrastructure than a jet thruster ever could, and that's never going to change. VTOL jet fighters like the F-38 we see in Black Ops 2, obviously inspired by the very real F-35B, are used specifically for takeoff and landing from aircraft carriers, which is why we very likely will never see VTOLs used like this, in civilian settings at least. Speaking of tech for the average person, civilian technology. We do live in the future. Does it feel like it yet? Smartphones and VR, electric cars and wireless charging. But why do we have no floating cities? One thing I think Black Ops 2 does get right about the future is, sadly, wealth inequality. The difference between life on the floating city of Colossus and in the streets of Pakistan or even LA are obvious, but in the real 2025, the rich of the world aren't loitering around custom-built floating cities listening to dubstep. They're doing what they've always done, just traveling to nicer places and, buying stuff. Floating cities still don't exist for reasons that become obvious when you think about them for even a second. They're a sanitation nightmare. They require constant resupply and upkeep, and they can't even travel across the globe like a cruise ship could. Basically, the money it takes to build and maintain one is simply better used on a permanent luxury resort or city, and people are building those in 2025. Citizens of Colossus enjoy such luxuries as malls and extremely invasive surveillance for the sake of personalized advertising. The latter is a staple of dystopian sci-fi of the early 2000s to 2010s, and it's one that absolutely came true, with personal data being one of the most hotly traded commodities around. However, how this marketing manifests is something media from this era always gets wrong. Everything is on billboards. There's just too many screens, ads, wall screens, posters, jumbotrons. This is something that, as cool looking as it always is, really has not come true. It's not that advertising isn't pervasive, it's as present as ever in every aspect of your life, just not on a big screen in the mall. We do see a number of small personal data devices in the game, from tablets to PDAs to flexible displays like this one, a tech that had just been invented at the time of Black Ops 2's release, and one that is just barely starting to hit mainstream in the real world in 2024 to 2025, with companies like Samsung doubling down on foldable touchscreen devices. Black Ops 2 as a whole does represent civil technology in a somewhat believable way, but as a clear product of the 2010s, it's filled with a very 2010s vision of cool, an absurd amount of clear glass displays, high-techy circles, bleeps and bloops with that very Iron Man aesthetic, something that makes much of the tech feel extremely dated compared to the slick analog minimalism of actual tech in the 2020s. Most of the technology we find in our homes or in our pockets started in one of two places: the film industry or the military. Wingsuits, jetpacks, some of the craziest stuff the Black Ops themselves are handling in the game, they existed back in 2012 and they still exist today. But sorry to say, no one's really taking this technology super seriously, outside of thrill-seeking pastimes, certainly not in high-risk military applications. However, military tech people absolutely are taking seriously heads-up displays. While they are absolutely not as seamless or ubiquitous as those in Black Ops 2, HUD systems are one of the US military's main goals right now, through the IVAS Integrated Visual Audio System program. Microsoft's HoloLens 2 had the contract for several years now, but with many issues still yet to be ironed out, IVAS is about to be opened back up for other contractors to take a shot at it. HUDs, while having been used in fighter jet pilot helmets for decades, are still too clunky and intrusive for use on the ground, at least for now. Much of the future military tech that we see in Black Ops 2 has to do with some sort of HUD, giving the user information right in front of their eyes, such as with millimeter wave scanner technology, seen here in the Colossus level at a security checkpoint. This is, of course, very real technology. You may have passed through one of these in an airport at some point. However, I don't really see how displaying it on an entire wall-sized screen provides much benefit. A far less believable version of this technology is the Millimeter Scanner Reflex Sight, an attachment in the game's campaign and multiplayer. It provides images of targets through any surface at intermittent pulses. There is a device called the Xaver 1000 that proclaims to be able to scan and locate moving human figures as well as static objects inside a room through solid walls. But not only is there very little evidence of it actually working as advertised, this device needs to be placed directly in contact with said wall to detect almost anything. Something a bit closer yet less developed is the Wi-Fi-based motion detecting system developed by MIT. By using the differences in density between static objects and the soft water-based human body, a relatively reliable position of a moving or static human can be detected by radio waves, regardless of walls or hard objects in the way. But safe to say, we're far from this technology being something that you could put in a holographic sight. Another scanning attachment, the Target Finder, is actually far more believable and could conceivably exist today. With the advent of computer-assisted hybrid thermal optics seen in devices such as the US Army's ENVG-B and clip-on thermals like eCody, a reflex sight which identifies and labels targets on a heads-up display is basically something that we already have, just not in such a compact package. In general, as far as depicting the cutting edge of a 2020s battlefield, Black Ops 2 is quite realistic and doesn't take things too far into the absurd for the most part. Reflex sights, EOTech holos, and hybrid magnified optics all could easily be found fielded today. But okay, for real, it's a shooter. What about the guns? Despite an overall flashy and modernized appearance, Black Ops 2's arsenal was, give a few exceptions, quite grounded. All of these weapons are real and have seen military, law enforcement, or defense usage at some point in history. Possibly the most unbelievable part of Black Ops 2's weapons selection is the utter lack of either M4 pattern or AK pattern rifles in its 2025 sections. While technically real weapons, the fact that sparsely equipped rebel groups are wielding the Czech Scorpion Evo or Indian MSMC over a classic Uzi or AK 40k does feel pretty absurd. But Black Ops 2's weapon pool really has the most fun with its inclusion of speculative concept weapons, such as the now legendary XM8. The XM8 was the very tail end result of the decades-spanning OICW program, or Objective Individual Combat Weapon. The drawn-out effort started in the late 1980s to replace the extremely outdated M16 rifle. To make a long story short, the XM8 and XM25 airburst launcher were the bastard children of OICW, and while neither were ever formally adopted, the XM8 got very close. So close, in fact, that many pieces of pop culture in the 2010s portrayed the US military in the near future as having fully and formally adopted the XM8 as their standard rifle, and Black Ops 2 naming it the M8A1, as in the modern version of the M4A1, shows that they came to the same conclusion. Another little example of a forgotten contender is the LSAT, a caseless ammunition firing LMG, which was intended to replace the M249 SAW as part of the Lightweight Small Arms Technologies program. Yep, there are a lot of programs if you didn't know. Caseless ammo, essentially solid gunpowder encasing a round rather than cased in a shell, was seriously investigated as a solution to the heavy weight added by brass shells from the 80s to 2010s. In reality, however, neither the LSAT nor XM8 will ever have their day. In 2024, the replacement for the M4, M16, and SAW was officially won by Sig Sauer with the XM7 and XM250. Something that no game or media seems to have foreseen is the complete scrapping of every future weapons program from the last 40 years in favor of basically a newer, better version of the thing that everyone was used to. There are a few weapons in Black Ops 2 that are completely made up. The PDW-57, for example, completely fictional, it appears to be a visual combination of the Magpul PDR, a 5.56x45 concept assault rifle, and the FNP-90. The SMR, this technically seems to be based on the Sarich 308, a concept weapon invented by design student Andrei Ovsyannikov. It was never actually built, so I'm counting it as a made-up weapon. Still, whichever weapons artist found this thing and decided to model it, good on you. The Storm PSR. When I saw this thing in Black Ops 2's campaign trailer, it blew my mind. This thing, when charged up, can penetrate through solid objects. The more it's charged, the more ammo is depleted. Seemingly based on Metal Storm technology, a weapon in which rounds are stacked in a barrel and sequentially activated by electrical impulses at a round's exact location in the barrel, allows many stacked rounds to be fired in sequence. For the Storm PSR to function this way makes sense. The longer the user holds down the trigger, the more rounds are fired in a shot, meaning deeper penetration through an object. As far as 2025 technology is concerned, this thing could absolutely exist. So, design-wise, bravo weapons team. Does it exist? Well, no. When you look up "Did Black Ops 2 predict the future?", you're likely to run into its key plot point: drones. Drones are the major catalyst for Black Ops 2's storyline, gameplay, and themes, and they are very much a part of global conversations, news headlines, and the changing face of civil life and warfare today in the real 2020s. But how they are depicted in Black Ops 2, what role they actually play, that's where things get a little more complex. Okay, so what they got right. The use of drones on a massive scale, and at varying scales themselves. Everything from massive high-altitude bombers like the Lodestar in multiplayer, reminiscent of currently fielded stealth drones, to the tiny Mission Impossible-esque Ziggy, my personal favorite drone in the game, which does hold up as relatively believable today, with the current proliferation of tiny surveillance-focused drones for military applications such as the Teledyne FLIR Black Hornet Nano. The most iconic drone in the game, the Dragonfire, appears quite in line with modern quad-rotor drones, and its use case, a remotely piloted augmentation to a ground assault, does line up with real tech that exists and is widely used today. Possibly the best example of the game's sci-fi inventions turned real is, sort of horrifyingly, the Hunter Killer. Small field deployable loitering munitions which can circle, designate, and then remotely attack a target are very real, and will likely become more and more common in the coming years. These Pakistani ISI drones are extremely reminiscent of the Airbus VSR 700 developed sometime around 2018, and the way that they are shown patrolling in a disaster zone feels extremely grounded today. The AGR, a small tread-driven UGV or unmanned ground vehicle, is very much a real thing, and actually has been for decades. There are too many versions of these to count, but for example, the Talon drone is used worldwide, and over 3,000 of them have been deployed in the last 20 years or so. And as terrifying as it is, I did find this video of a robo-dog with a flamethrower. But that's where the game's depiction of drones begins to falter when compared to reality. Firstly, almost every drone in the game possesses self-driving and even completely autonomous offensive capabilities. This is still not the case in terms of real-life combat drones, and where it is, extremely divisive ethical discussions come into play immediately. Ground and close air drones in Black Ops 2 fill a ton of direct combat applications, largely by shooting mounted machine guns at foes. Outside of extremely specific and odd examples, this is still rarely the case in real life, for a simple reason actually: guns are heavy. They require ammo, which is heavy. And they are bad at aiming, which means they need more ammo, which is heavy. Combat-focused attack drones in real life are almost solely high-altitude remote-piloted aircraft, such as the now infamous MQ-9 Reaper, loitering munitions, or essentially flying bombs, or small custom jerry-rig devices usually created from civilian technology. The biggest mistake that Black Ops 2 makes, though, in its depiction of drones is how universal and ubiquitous they are. In Black Ops 2's world, the Dragonfire, Claw, and AGR are the Glock, SAW, and M4 of the future battlefield. And that's just not how things turned out. Drone warfare in the real 2020s is an incredible modern demonstration of the way technological advances in warfare cancel themselves out throughout history. How military-industrial complexes, despite trillions of dollars of R&D, always seem to fail to accurately prepare for the simple brutality and unpredictability of armed conflict. Battlefields of today and tomorrow are ones in which drone usage is and will be a constant reality. And not through machine-manufactured mass weapons of a standing army, but through civilian, hobbled-together devices born from utter necessity and desperation. The advent of drones and electronic warfare didn't create a sci-fi high-tech battlefield of super soldiers and robot warriors. It actually brought warfare and tactics back to the 19th century. Black Ops 2's world is a perfected, fully established drone-based military-industrial complex, one that seems to have arisen out of the ground all at once. Everything is built perfectly, simultaneously, and to spec, all working on an all-encompassing intranet, which allows Raul Menendez to hack every piece of the US's drone and defense infrastructure at once. Not only does this not get how drones are actually used, it fundamentally makes the US military seem like a far more universally functioning entity than it actually is. But besides that, this drone military is wholly unbelievable. How would drones become this widespread, manufactured at such a scale by nations all over the world, without any presence of equally well-developed anti-drone technology? Why are soldiers shooting down drones with rifles rather than being clad in anti-RF emitting gear, or wielding microwave drone-frying weapons at all times? Black Ops 2 falls into a classic trap of futurist media, creating a world filled with futuristic feeling technology warped through a lens that, in retrospect, shows its age and ignorance of the future that it predicts. What Black Ops 2 does get right is the idea that no matter how well equipped a massive military is, no matter how advanced they are, it's their own very human mistakes, their hubris, that will follow them, and ultimately will be the deciding factor in their fate. In October 1903, a New York Times article states the combined efforts of mathematicians and scientists could maybe produce a working flying machine in something from 1 million to 10 million years from now. The same day that was published, Orville Wright and his brother Wilbur began assembly on the airplane they would successfully fly for 59 seconds on December 17th, 2 months later. There's an impossibility when it comes to accurately predicting the future, especially when it comes to technological advancement. Today we see many conflicts, both domestic and foreign, being driven by the opening of old wounds, future generations answering for the mistakes and poor planning of the past. And that's something that Black Ops 2 predicts most correctly, because it's not speculating, it's just observing. War media is tough, because when you look too close at it, it either becomes pro-war propaganda or an anti-war statement. The early COD games were often firmly in the latter category, and the recent games of the 2010s and 20s steer far closer to the former. But Black Ops 2, in my opinion, sits comfortably and beautifully outside of any of this. It predicts the future very accurately in some places and very poorly in others, because it's not trying to predict the future. It's bombast and entertainment first, and the people making it knew this. P.W. Singer, analyst, contributor to military think tanks, and consultant on Black Ops 2, points out that the militaries of the world, they aren't concerned with which weapons look the coolest, which locales are the most exciting to fight in, but the creators of a video game are. Black Ops 2 does have something to say about the state of the world, about its dark corners in history, and yet it has the self-awareness to never take itself too seriously. It's creative, it's gorgeously stupid at times, and most importantly, it's a blast to play. I don't know if Black Ops 2 will have predicted the future, and in many ways, I really hope it hasn't. But as we head into 2025, I'm sure glad that I got to visit it one last time. I'm Rilo, and I like to talk about stuff that I think is cool. Subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I'll catch you in the new year. Peace.